Welcome back to Hopkins at Home. I'm delighted you're all here. And today we're going to talk about closing the deal, how to craft the perfect pitch. Today is all about persuasion and influence. And if I could rename this lecture, it would be focused on the science of getting what you want. Because we're going to explore a variety of techniques and strategies today to help us become more persuasive and help us become more influential. With that, let's turn to our first concept, or at least our first slide as we look over the agenda. We'll talk about reframing persuasion first. What does persuasion mean? What is persuasion really all about? Second, we'll look at the building blocks of persuasion. What are some elements or tools that we can use to become more persuasive? And then finally, we'll look at the motivated sequence. I know all of you did the pre-reading and have a good idea about Monroe's motivated sequence, but we'll look at MMS, as we lovingly call it, in more depth today and how we could use it to pitch our ideas and to advocate for the issues and ideas that we care about. Well, with that, let's start with our opening question. What is persuasion? If we're going to study persuasion, we need to have a working definition of it. So in the chat box, please, can you write for me a definition of persuasion? Let's begin there. Well, it's interesting that a lot of these definitions fall into category one. I believe something, and I want to convince you to believe it too. The problem with this traditional approach, when we think about persuasion in terms of convincing, is that sometimes it feels pushy. It feels like we're being sold to. It's not relational. And so we tend to be less effective when we're trying to push or convince other people to do something we want them to do. Instead, I want to move away from definition one and move toward definition two. Let's think about persuasion for purposes of this class as identifying and satisfying needs. And when I use the word needs, I'm referring to problems, to issues, to opportunities. And there's a question that I hope you'll all write down, and I'm going to type it in the chat box. Here it is. What's keeping my audience up at night? What's keeping my audience up at night? That's a critical question for persuasion and frankly for leadership. Because if we can figure out what's keeping our audience up at night, what they're worried about, what's on their mind, what's bothering them, and we can make that pain go away or satisfy those problems with particular products, with particular services, or with particular proposals, then we're going to be a lot more effective. So we want to move away from convincing people to do things and instead identify or try to figure out what's keeping them up at night. Try to figure out what they're worried about, what's on their mind, and how we can make that pain go away physically or metaphorically. So this is the definition, the working definition that we're going to think about and work through as we approach persuasion. And as you know from the pre-reading, it's the foundation for Monroe's motivated sequence. The idea that we want to identify what people's needs are and then satisfy those needs. And when we use the word satisfy, we're talking about proposing a solution that helps make that pain go away, helps make those problems go away. So with this definition in mind, let's look now a little bit deeper into persuasion and think about with it. We were at an alumni event, and I asked a student I hadn't seen in a while, "What do you remember from my classes?" And he paused for a minute and looked at me and said, "Nobody cares." And that's right. It wasn't that nobody cares about my class, at least I hope that wasn't the case. But he smiled and remembered the fact that nobody cares unless it matters to them. So we have to make our messages all about the audience. And remembering now, let's dig rather a little deeper into with it. So this comes from Nick Morgan's research. And Morgan says that the audience, any audience, whether it's you listening to me or your audience listening to you, an audience starts with one question in mind. Why? Why are you speaking and not me? Why is this important? Why should I pay attention? And if you're successful, and Morgan argues it's 1,000,000 to 1 shot against in his article, Before You Open Your Mouth, if you're successful, the audience will start asking, how? How do I get started? How do I get involved? How do I implement this idea? So the goal, says Morgan, is to move the audience from why to how. That's what we're trying to accomplish on a deeper level when it comes to With It. And the goal for persuasion is, of course, as we remember, to keep With It top of mind. That's ultimately what we're trying to do. Keep the what's in it for them top of mind. And I shared that Toastmasters article I wrote that was just published this month on sales and storytelling. But at its core, when we think about persuasion, it's all about With It. We have to get inside our audience's head and figure out what's in it for them. Well, let me pause here for a moment and ask a critical question. How do we do that? All right, so I've just talked about the importance of With It, the importance of identifying and satisfying needs. How do we do that? Any thoughts on how do we get inside our audience's head? How do we figure out what's keeping our audience up at night? It's tricky, but let me give you a couple tips. One is you could ask the event organizer. So there's always someone who has introduced you. Who has invited you. There's always someone who has invited you. And that person is a wealth of information. So in this instance, Abby and her teammates invited me to speak, and I peppered them, as you'll recall, with all sorts of questions about who would be in the room. I asked, what are their backgrounds? How long ago did they graduate from Hopkins? Why are they coming? And those were just some of the questions I asked to try to understand some about you so that I could tailor my content appropriately. Obviously, it would be very different if I were speaking to a group of folks who had just graduated from Hopkins versus folks who have a little more experience. Similarly, it would be quite different if I were just speaking to a group primarily made up of graduates of arts and sciences versus folks who come from a wide variety of backgrounds. So asking the event organizer is key to our success. They will know far more about the audience than we will. Certainly doing research on the organization or on some key targets is also useful. And let me talk to you a little bit about targets. This is a little bit more of an advanced strategy in persuasion. So let's say you're speaking today on Zoom, but hopefully next year in person, to a group of 100 or 200 people. You're not going to be able to look them all up on LinkedIn. I mean, you certainly could, but that may not be the best use of your time. But what you can do is you can look up your targets, or sometimes in fundraising, we use the word prospects. And what you're doing, whether you call them targets or prospects, is key people that you're trying to influence. In every large room, there are always going to be those key people you're trying to influence. Maybe because they're the most senior, maybe because they're the decision makers, maybe because you want to impress them so you get invited to other forums. Whatever the case, those are the people you want to look up. You want to read recent articles they've written. You want to look up their profiles on LinkedIn. You want to look at their last few tweets on Twitter, whatever it may be. And then here's the technique. You can work in some references to things they care about without telling them that you're doing it for them. Well, let me move on now and go back, if I can, to the content for today and move on past With It and talk about the building blocks of persuasion. And there are a couple we're going to look at today. We're going to talk about logos, we're going to talk about pathos, and we're going to talk about ethos. So these are important because these are three strategies of persuasion. And what we find, close logos, we tend to define less as context and more as logic. Logos having to do with logical appeals. Pathos, you're right, having to do with emotional appeals. And ethos, Pavel got this one, it's credibility. But particularly, it's the speaker's credibility or the writer's credibility. So it's the credibility of the speaker. So let's look at each of these in turn, because all three of these fit together, and we have to use all three if we're going to be successful in persuasion. All right, so let's look at logos first. So logos is about offering logical evidence. And I'm going to teach you about one particular type of evidence called a billboard statistic. Now, a billboard statistic is if you're riding down the highway and you see a billboard, and there's only room on that billboard for one statistic, which statistic would you share? So in a presentation, you don't want to share 3, 4, and 5 statistics in a row, because how many will the audience remember? Some of you may think 1, often it's 0. So you want to instead share your billboard statistic, your strongest statistic, so that you can ensure that the audience pays attention. Take a look at this ad from Verizon Wireless. Let me, by the way, disclose I have no affiliation with Verizon other than I am a customer of theirs, but they have not paid me to feature them. But if we take a look here at this recent Verizon ad, what is their billboard statistic? Take a look at this ad and tell me, what is it in particular? Which statistic, what type of data is Verizon using to get you to think that they're the best? What are some other metrics that Verizon and other companies could use? Because not everyone has Verizon, so clearly there must be other dimensions besides LTE coverage that we might want to consider when it comes to choosing a provider. So you can see here that there are different ways to compare these different service providers. And these are, by the way, primarily US based companies, but certainly other companies as we look around the globe that may be more familiar to you. But that's the key. So as we think about billboard statistics, you want to pick the statistic that makes your best argument. That's the key. So whichever statistic you choose in your presentation, choose your strongest statistic. Don't give a list of 3, 4, or 5 different statistics. Give the one that best makes your case. That's an important part of logos. So besides logos, let's think a little bit more about other ways to convey logic. We can talk about examples or case studies. That's another great way to convey the logic of your argument. Don't just talk in general terms, but talk about other cases that you've seen. Certainly, as you think about articles in JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, even the most technical, even the most highly scientific articles often start with a case of a patient, for instance, that helps bring the readers in and understand the context in more depth. And then finally, one you may be less familiar with are called commonplaces. Commonplaces is a term that refers to commonly shared beliefs. So here's an example. Let's say you're speaking to a group of travel agents and you want to get their attention and you want to add some logic to your argument, strengthen your opening, for instance. You could say, hey folks, the travel industry is changing. No longer are people booking by phone the way they used to. Now people are going online more than ever before to book their travel. So either we need to change with the times or we're going to be left behind. That's an example of a commonplace. You're going to see a lot of people nodding in agreement. And so commonplaces are ways of getting your audience to say yes. And that's the key in persuasion. When people start saying yes, they keep saying yes. When people start saying yes, they keep saying yes. So that's the power of commonplaces, saying things at the beginning of a speech or presentation that are non-controversial, that get people to nod, that get people to say, yes, I agree with that. That's an important part of strengthening your argument. Saying things like, we're all here to become better communicators. Yes. We all want to be better leaders. Yes. We all want to give Dr. Cohen $50. Yes. So that's an example, for instance, of this notion that when we start saying yes, we are primed, to use the word from science, we are primed to keep saying yes. So if you think about customer service agents, this is why when you call a number, they'll say, is your address still 123 Main Street? Yes. Is your phone number still 555-555-5555? Yes. Would you like to buy this upgrade for a low monthly fee of $29.95? Yes, I would. And so again, that's priming. And so it's all around us, but now maybe you recognize it a little bit more. Well, let's go back now, if I can, to the role of emotion, which is pathos. And that's another important part of persuasion. And there are a variety of ways to evoke emotion. And today, by the way, this is a high-level presentation, so we could go into each of these in far more depth, but I'm just giving you a taste of what I cover in my class and the research on persuasion. But there's far more here. And with that, I want to focus on 2 particular strategies: appeals to hope and appeals to fear. These are two wonderful ways to get buy-in, or at least to heighten the interest in something we are selling. And you may not like the word selling, but I'm selling right now. I'm selling ideas. We are all salespeople. And so having these strategies knowing about these strategies is important, not just for advocating for things that we care about, but also because they're all around us. So they can help make us a more perceptive communicator and perceptive citizen. Well, let's look, if I can, at an appeal to hope first, and then we'll look at an appeal to fear. Let's take a look at this appeal. This is from an organization called Hope Against Cancer that's based in the UK. Take a look at this ad. And then in the chat box, can you share with me what are some ways that this organization uses this ad to create hopefulness? Hope sells, folks. Hope is powerful. And it is, Stan, yes, a positive appeal. Floor saying she's smiling. And so that creates a hopefulness, the idea that she has fought cancer and survived, and what a blessing that is. And she's here to tell her story. Michelle talks about the visual language of using her hands. Yes, that openness and the written message there. She says, last year I was diagnosed with liver cancer, and this organization, Hope Against Cancer, has given me hope. And now she asks us, the audience, to please give others a helping hand. Megan says, putting a face behind the message, personalizing it, humanizing it. Yes, very much so. Joanne, a bit more skeptical, saying, how do we know she's not an actress? Well, I don't know that, but I am thinking through the ad that she perhaps has volunteered to share her experience and to participate in this ad campaign. But certainly very important to be skeptical of ads as well. I think the key here, though, is to remember that hope is powerful. Hope sells, folks. We want a more hopeful future. And when we hear people talking about how doing something will create a better city, a better country, a better world, we are called to act. If you think about the Obama campaign back in 2008 and 2012, he was selling hope and change. And the American people bought that message and elected him president twice. So we buy into things where hope is at the core. And we too can use hope to talk about how doing what we want people to do, buying this product, buying this service, adopting this proposal rather, will lead to a stronger, a healthier, a happier family, that we will become richer, we will have a more fruitful life. Those are appeals to hope. But the opposite of appeals to hope are appeals to fear. And fear also sells. Fear also motivates us to say yes. Let's take a look at this ad from the Texas Department of Transportation. How does this ad create fear? If you could type your response in the chat box. How does this ad create fear? So fear sells as well. And so what I often tell my students is that we don't just want to talk about what will happen if people do buy our products or buy our services. We want to talk about what will happen if they don't. We call these in research gain frames and loss frames. So I think, for instance, about research on getting folks vaccinated for HPV, the human papilloma virus. We could certainly talk about the benefits of getting vaccinated for HPV, and that may motivate some people to get vaccinated. But we also could talk about what will happen if people don't get vaccinated for HPV. That's the loss frame. That's the fear appeal. And so I often tell my students, if you study for this exam, you're going to do really well. But by the way, if you don't study and you go a little too easy this weekend, I may see you again in this class next term. And as much as I love all of you, I'm not sure that you want to come take my class again. So that's a fear appeal. And it's important to know that in social science, people are more motivated by what they stand to lose than what they stand to gain. People are more motivated by what they stand to lose than what they stand to gain. So that's the power of gain frames and loss frames. Well, the last category is credibility, and our credibility as speakers are important. And so we want to make sure to demonstrate our trustworthiness. If we're going to have credibility as a speaker, since that's what ethos is about, it's our credibility. We want to cite examples of other times that we were involved and that we followed through. So if we tell people that we're going to follow up with them by Monday at 5 p.m., then we want to cite other times that we have followed up. But it's important, credibility is important. And so we want to remember other examples when we've followed through. And if there's a particular, let's say, charity that we are passionate about, we want to talk about our involvement in that nonprofit organization. It makes it more real. It shows people that we have a connection to that charity, to that nonprofit, to that cause that we are talking about. We also want to use a technique called parroting. And parroting is where we want to make ourselves as similar to the audience as possible. So dress like the audience, or at least close to what the audience is wearing. Talk like the audience. So if they're a more rambunctious audience, being more gregarious is always a nice technique to use. But let's say it's a quieter audience, turning it down a little bit, getting a little bit softer, using more pausing is a way to parrot that audience and make them more comfortable with you. And then finally, talking about your subject matter expertise, and not saying I'm an expert, you should listen to me, but using statements like, I've been studying communication for the past decade, or I've been involved in this organization for the past 6 years, or I remember playing chess ever since I was a child, and it's a game I've always loved. So referencing your expertise in a humble but direct way is also a way to add credibility, to let people know that you know what you're talking about. And certainly having people share your bio, for instance, before the meeting can be a great way to build credibility as well. All right, we're about to turn to Monroe's motivated sequence, our 5-step pitch process. But just as some background, just as some context, Monroe's motivated sequence, which we're going to call MMS for short, was created by Alan Monroe, who is a professor of rhetoric at Purdue University. And it is a 5-step process that's based on this idea called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance. It's that schism between what is and what could be. And the brilliance of Monroe's motivated sequence, what Alan Monroe's piercing insight was that we intentionally want to create cognitive dissonance in listeners' minds. We intentionally want to create that dissonance. We intentionally want to create a gap between what they have in their lives and where they could be in their lives. And that is the key to motivating them to take the action that we're advocating, or to implement the solution that we're advocating. That's the basis. That's the brilliance of Monroe's motivated sequence, that we intentionally want to create cognitive dissonance in listeners' minds, that gap will motivate them to say yes. What is the attention step? Certainly nice ways to begin. Remember, billboard statistic, as we talked about earlier, is another nice technique. And you might even want to share a quote. It doesn't have to be from Oprah or Gandhi, but certainly a quote, let's say, from someone they would recognize, someone in the field, someone in the industry, someone that audience would know and respect. Also great ways to start. No matter how we start, we want to start strong and get folks looking away from their laptops, looking away from their smartphones, and focusing on what we have to say. Then we go to the need step. What's the need step all about? So this is where we're creating pain. This is where we are focused on what's keeping people up at night. And to use the sales term, I call this is where you focus on those pain points. And so even if people know why you're having the meeting, we still want to reinforce those reasons in step 2. Even if everyone knows why we're there, because let's say revenues are down, we still want to reiterate the causes of that pain, what's happening, what people are feeling in step 2, so that then they are motivated to say, gosh, we have to do something about this. Which takes us to step 3, satisfaction. So step 3 is all about the solution. And this is where we talk about the product that we're offering, the service that we're offering, or the proposal that we're offering. But notice you don't talk about that until step 3. So the mistake that a lot of people make is they say, good morning, I'm here to talk about a revolutionary new product that's going to change your life. You know what the audience is thinking? Nobody cares. I don't care. Nobody cares. They don't care because it's not about them. We have to make them care by getting their attention in step one and by establishing the need in step two. And only when we've created pain in listeners' minds, only when they start to feel, gosh, there is a problem that affects me, my family, my community, only then are they open to doing something about it. Only then are they receptive to hearing about your product, your service, or your proposal. And this is the same whether we're talking at the United Nations or whether we're pitching a product or a service to a group of potential customers. We're still following MMS. It's just a different type of audience, a different type of speech or presentation. So that, I hope, makes sense in terms of opening the gap within cognitive dissonance and then resolving it. But there's still two important steps left. Let's turn to step 4. What is visualization all about? Which is a step a lot of people don't think about before they come to this class. What happens if we don't implement this solution? But there are two other options as well. I think of ads I've seen recently for skincare products. They have these really unhappy looking, sad people. And then after they use the product, their lives are changed forever. They're happy, they're radiant, they're more confident simply because of this product that they bought. That, of course, is the contrast method. And often we see that at work in a lot of ads for workout products or health foods products or diet products. The contrast method is a powerful approach. But certainly, to Megan and to Tenda's points, you have the positive method and the negative method at your disposal as well. And you could use one or more of these in step 4 to help show people the power of your solution. But we're not done yet. A step that's really important at Asola, step 5, a step that a lot of people sometimes forget. They just say, and nice seeing you all. But step 5 is all about action. And to be effective, the action must meet 2 criteria. And I'm going to write these in the chat box. One is easy to do. And second is can be done right now. The easier something is to do, the more it can be done right now, the more likely people are to do it. So don't tell people to send you an email when they get back to their desks. Give them time during the meeting to send you the email. Say, please open up your laptops or your phones. Write this email address next to the word to. Write my best idea in the subject line, and then take 2 minutes right now to send me an email. You will get many more emails following that approach than you will than if you say, so when you get back to your desk or later today, send me an email. Compliance will be higher. Compliance is the term that we use in research, the percent of people who do what we ask them to do. Don't tell people to go register to vote. Go bring voter registration forms into your event or walk people through the process of filling it out and give them time right there to fill out that voter registration form. Don't tell people to donate at a later time. Tell them to pull out their phones right now and to text 25568 to Cohen and donate $10 to the Dr. Stephen Cohen Fund. Whatever it takes to get people to act right now and make it easy to do. When it satisfies both those criteria, people are going to be more likely to do it. So just to recap, as we look at these 5 steps in more depth, if we're going to hit the target, we need to follow these 5 steps in order. We don't want to skip any steps. We want to do them in order. And when we structure our pitches following these 5 steps, we are far more effective. And so, in other words, what we're doing is we're getting the audience's attention, making them look up from their phones with a strong opening. We're creating pain in listeners' minds via the need step, saying, oh my gosh, they think there is a problem. I need to do something about this. We satisfy that pain. We make that pain go away with a particular product, with a particular service, or a particular proposal that we explain in a little more depth. We help the audience visualize how it will make their lives better, or what will happen if they don't do what we're asking them to do. And then finally, we talk about next steps. What action do we want them to take right now that's easy to do and that can be done right now to help make the solution happen? So that solution is more strategic. That solution is more high level, but the action is much more tactical. The action is about next steps. What can they do right now to help make the solution happen? Well, folks, now you have a powerful framework that you can use whenever you're trying to sell a product, sell a service, or sell an idea, whether it's at work, whether it's in your entrepreneurial endeavors, whether it's in a charitable or nonprofit context. You have a powerful 5-step framework that you can use again and again throughout your career, throughout your life, to help be successful, to help be more persuasive. And it's also something that you'll see all around you: radio ads, TV ads, different types of fundraising appeals. Now you know what people are doing and how they're using this structure to help get to you say yes, help for you to say yes as well. So you also can be a much more informed citizen. Also, let me remind you that some of the other tools we've used today, logos, pathos, and ethos, logic, emotion, and credibility, you can sprinkle those tools throughout the 5 steps. And so those are some of the elements that you can deploy as you move through MMS so that you can be more effective. So you can think about what we've learned today as almost a matrix. On the horizontal axis, you have the 5 steps of MMS, of Monroe's motivated sequence. And on the vertical axis, you can see you have logos, pathos, and ethos. And so you can sprinkle some of these tools along the way to help heighten the power, heighten the persuasiveness of your pitch, of your appeals. Well, it has been wonderful to have you all here today. I really appreciate your making time out of your busy schedules to be with us. We conclude this course together next week with our 3rd and last session on one of my favorite topics, which is the art of inspiration and some other advanced public speaking techniques that powerful speakers use to get their audience to say yes, to buy in, but more importantly, to mobilize audiences to do big things. And so I hope you'll take a look at the pre-reading. There it is. How leaders can inspire through their words. An article that goes into some of the techniques of inspiration. And then we'll look at some of these more advanced speaking techniques that politicians and CEOs use, but more importantly, that we can use to get people to follow us, trust us, and believe in us. See you next week, everybody. Great being with you. Bye-bye now.